On 5 News tonight, Cameron quits politics, Trump speaks out about Hillary's health, and new minimum wage allegations. Just 2 months after leaving Downing Street, the former Prime Minister David Cameron stands down as an MP.
The circumstances of my resignation, it isn't really possible to be a proper backbench MP as a former Prime Minister. I think everything you do will become a big distraction.
The fallout from Hillary Clinton's fall after she reveals she's got pneumonia. Donald Trump says he'll release details of his own health test. And one of Britain's biggest home delivery firms, Hermes, could face an investigation over the minimum wage. Also tonight, why are we so good at the Paralympics? As the goals just keep on coming, I'll be asking, what's the secret of Britain's success? Good evening, welcome to 5 News Tonight. I'm Matt Barbett. He says he doesn't want to be a distraction. And so 2 months after leaving Downing Street, David Cameron has announced he is leaving politics altogether. He has quit as an MP, saying he fully supports his successor, Theresa May, as Prime Minister. He denies his decision has anything to do with her plans to bring back grammar schools, saying the timing is a coincidence. Our political editor, Andy Bell, has more.
This was how his time in Downing Street ended, but he had said he would carry on as an MP to the next election, probably 2020. But now he's resigning from that position too, and ending his political career.
I thought about this long and hard over the summer, and I've decided the right thing to do is to stand down as the Member of Parliament for Witney. There'll be a by-election. I'll give the Conservative candidate my full support. But in my view, with modern politics, with the circumstances of my resignation, it isn't really possible to be a proper backbench MP as a former Prime Minister.
It had begun so well for the young leader who wanted to change the image of his party. Whether it was hug a husky or hug a hoodie, he presented a new brand of conservatism, and it got him into Downing Street, just in coalition.
I came into politics because I love this country. I think its best days still lie ahead.
His time in office was dominated by attempts to cut public spending and the opposition to it. In foreign policy, initial success in Libya later turned sour, and he survived the Scottish independence referendum. But in the end, he lost his biggest gamble. The European vote forced him out. His successor, Theresa May, has said in a statement she'd been proud to serve in his government and they had achieved great things. But as he found the new relationship between them too difficult.
I spoke to Theresa May and she was very understanding about this decision. I support her, I support what she's doing. She's got off to a cracking start. Obviously, I'm going to have my own views about different issues. People would know that. And that's really the point. As a former Prime Minister, it is very difficult, I think, to sit as a backbencher and not be an enormous diversion and distraction from what the government's doing. I don't want to be that distraction.
The former Chancellor George Osborne's tweeted that this is a sad day and he knows how difficult this decision has been for his old friend.
After all, as I once said, I was the future once.
It's less than 2 months since he stepped down as Prime Minister and delivered this farewell. Now he's leaving Parliament too. How quickly the Cameron era has come to an end.
Yeah, and a different future for him now, Andy. He says it's not really possible to be a proper backbench MP as well as being a former Prime Minister. Why not?
Because the role of a backbench MP normally is to speak out, to speak your mind on what you believe. And he believes that any time he opened his mouth in the future, people would simply look at him and say, you're disagreeing with your successor or you're lining up behind your successor. And so he believes for that reason that you can't be that traditional backbench MP once you've been Prime Minister. And look at the timing of this announcement. It is pretty interesting. It came through minutes before the debate began in the House of Commons here on the new Prime Minister's plans for grammar schools. Grammar schools was a policy that David Cameron always set his face against. He really regarded it as something that the old-style Conservative Party, in his view, would have embraced, and he wanted to move on beyond it. And I think, although he's careful to say this is not about any one particular policy, I think he probably saw this as already showing the way the future might be, that if he were to say anything about the new policy, and of course at one point he will probably have to vote on the new policy, then people will simply say, this is the way you are disagreeing with your successor. And normally the convention is that the outgoing Prime Minister is very loyal to the person who takes over from him or her, and I think he just saw that that was going to be a real source of tension stretching into the future, as Theresa May is essentially changing an awful lot of what David Cameron did when he was in power.
And just very quickly, Andy, when he was in power, he'd say that led to a long list of things that are his legacy, but surely at the top of everyone else's list is going to be Brexit.
Yes, he would certainly say that he played his part in trying to put the public finances back on a proper footing, of reforming public services, things like same-sex marriage. He was very proud of bringing that in. But it's very difficult how anyone in the future is going to look at David Cameron in the history books and how that first entry against his name isn't going to be Brexit. After all, he brought it about, even though it was not the result that he wanted.
Andy, thank you very much indeed. To politics across the Atlantic now, and the US presidential candidate Hillary Clinton is facing serious questions about her health after cancelling a campaign trip to California. Her team admitted she'd been diagnosed with pneumonia after she stumbled at a 9/11 memorial event yesterday. Her rival Donald Trump, who's long questioned her fitness, wished her a speedy recovery, but said health was now an issue in the campaign. Warren Nettleford reports.
New questions this morning surrounding Hillary Clinton's health.
Hillary Clinton has canceled that California trip.
That startling piece of video came out.
And everybody's talking about
American TV news bulletins this morning reporting on what could be a decisive moment in this presidential campaign. Yesterday, Hillary Clinton was at a ceremony in New York to remember 9/11. She felt unwell and left early. But as she approached her van, she seemed on the point of collapse. Her legs buckled and her security team had to help her inside. At first, her staff only said the 68-year-old had become overheated and dehydrated. But then came the announcement she had been diagnosed with pneumonia on Friday. All through this campaign, the internet has been full of her opponents claiming Hillary Clinton is much sicker than she admits. Her team has dismissed such claims as deranged, but this news hasn't helped.
It makes her look like she tells fibs. It makes it look like she's incompetent. It makes it look like she's hiding things, like she doesn't have trust in the people. And, she could have solved this very easily. Her people could have come out on Friday when they knew and said, Mrs. Clinton's got, a little bit of pneumonia. It's nothing too bad. She just needs to rest a little bit.
This was just last week. Now we know this and other coughing fits were probably caused by pneumonia.
Every time I think about Trump, I get allergic.
But under pressure to release his own medical records, he's been uncharacteristically careful with his own language. Here's what he said, speaking on the phone to Fox News.
See what I see. The coughing fit was a week ago, so I assume that was pneumonia also. I mean, I would think it would have been, so something's going on. But I just hope she gets well and gets back on the trail, and we'll be seeing her at the debate.
Hillary Clinton re-emerged on Sunday saying she felt great, but she's cancelled campaigning for today and tomorrow, and in just 2 weeks there's the first TV debate with Trump. The message from her supporters, get well soon. Warren Nettleford, 5 News.
Now back here, there are calls for an investigation into the delivery firm Hermes over allegations that some of its workers receive less than the minimum wage. There are claims that some staff also face losing out on work because they attended hospital appointments. Simon Viger is with me now. Simon, what's been going on?
Well, it follows the big win for the unions over Sports Direct and 0 Hours. Hermes, a big courier firm, as you say, facing big questions over the national minimum wage, tax and self-employment contracts. Here's what the chairman of the Work and Pension Select Committee had to say today.
The great charge against Hermes is that they insist that people are self-employed, so they have no cost, they don't pay tax for them, they have no duty of care for them, but they treat them as though they are part of Hermes' workforce, having to turn up at a certain time, having to do certain tasks within a limited time scale, and woe betide you if you don't or can't turn up.
Well, here is the rebuttal from the company today. We have voluntarily embedded the principles of the national living wage into our business. Our average courier rate is £9.80. That's 36% above the minimum wage after all legitimate expenses have been deducted. Some confusion about whether there will be an inquiry. Frankfield says there will. The Department of Business says they've passed it to HM Revenue and Customs. And the TUC conference began in Brighton, and the General Secretary today is saying companies accused of this will find no hiding place.
OK, Simon, thanks a lot. Now, there may finally be some respite for the besieged people of Syria. A 10-day truce has begun, agreed by the US and Russia, and also welcomed by President Assad. It should mean aid can now reach areas in desperate need, but it's unlikely that all rebel groups will abide by the truce, and analysts say the situation is far too complex for it to hold. A warning that Catherine Jones' report begins on distressing images of a recent airstrike.
The start of the truce comes too late for the victims of this attack. With the agreement signed but not yet in force, the busy marketplace in the rebel-held city of Idlib was hit on Saturday, reportedly by Russian jets. Around 100 are thought to have died. Now the people of Syria should finally get some respite from this as a 10-day ceasefire begins. And in the capital Damascus, an emboldened Syrian president made a rare public appearance in a suburb his soldiers have recently retaken from opposition forces. The Syrian state is determined to recover every area from terrorists, Bashar al-Assad said, re-establishing safety and security, rebuilding everything. The ceasefire was brokered by Russia, which backs President Assad, and the US, which backs some of the rebel groups opposed to Assad's government. The truce allows both sides to continue bombing Islamist militants, including so-called Islamic State and groups previously linked to al-Qaeda. But some of those Islamist groups fight alongside US-backed rebels, so even targeted airstrikes against them could weaken the entire rebellion against the Syrian regime.
For the opposition, those fears will also surround whether this deal undermines them on the battlefield. They'll have to give up one of the groups which they've been fighting alongside, which they fear will lead to their eventual defeat.
Parts of Syria's second city, Aleppo, have been under siege for months, and people there are not convinced the truce will improve their lives.
There is nothing here in the markets. They are empty. So I know that there will not be a death by bombs, but another difficulty is other deaths by the lack of, for example, medical equipment.
Only yesterday, a suburb of Aleppo was attacked. The people of Syria must wait to see if tomorrow really is different. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
Detectives are launching a new appeal into the murder of Stephen Lawrence after the discovery of a woman's DNA. The new evidence was found on a bag strap left close to the scene of his killing in southeast London 23 years ago. The appeal has been made the day before what would have been Stephen's 42nd birthday. A study in England and Wales has revealed that where a girl grows up makes a huge difference to her life. The research looked at factors like education, poverty and teenage pregnancy rates and found that quality of life is worse in inner cities. Minnie Stevenson's been finding out what some girls are going through.
People stereotype girls and expect them to not be as strong and determined as men. In my school, there are loads of boys who sexually harass girls. Teachers are completely oblivious.
I feel pressured by the people I see around me every day, and I think how they look compared to me.
In their own words, how it feels to be a girl growing up in Britain today. A major study has found, despite being one of the most developed countries in the world, young women are facing harassment at school, they're worried about their body image, and the pressure to be popular on social media is affecting their mental health. The report ranked the worst and best places to be a girl, looking at factors like the rate of teenage pregnancy, education and child poverty. Middlesbrough in the northeast came out worst, followed by Blackpool, Manchester, Nottingham and Liverpool. In the top 5 best places to live were Waverley, Rushcliffe, Chiltern, Mole Valley, Epsom and Ewell. So with Middlesbrough ranking as officially the worst place to grow up as a girl, I've come to meet a group of sixth form students in the town. We wanted to know how they feel about 2 issues highlighted in the report: the stress caused by social media and the pressure to have the perfect body. You think social media has a negative impact, or is it something you kind of choose to ignore?
Just the pressure. Sometimes pressure gets to you, how many likes you get or whoever likes your photo or comments on your photo.
Was it actually making you unhappy, social media?
Yeah, it was. It was sort of the obsession with knowing what people are doing.
And in terms of body image, do you think there's, again, a lot of pressure on young girls to look a certain way?
When people are looking good and then they put some weight on, it's always criticised in the magazines, especially over summer.
And if you are anything above average, and there's a select few people which will make you feel like you are nothing.
The charity in charge of the report are now calling upon the government to take urgent action so that an entire generation of girls are not left feeling held back. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
Well, with me now is Kerry Smith from Plan International UK, which published today's report and did all that research. And Kerry, look, we don't want to denigrate all girls from Middlesbrough. I'm sure many of them are going to go on to do fantastic things later in life. But it is the bottom of the list when it comes to what you've looked at. Why?
We've taken 5 indicators. So we've looked at child poverty, life expectancy, GCSEs, teenage pregnancy, and the numbers not in education, training, education, employment, or in training. And across those indicators, that's why Middlesbrough is at the bottom. And obviously, geography does play a part in what happens to girls and what their life chances are. But every girl has an individual experience. And I think it's really important to say that we don't want to single out Middlesbrough because there are problems across the UK.
Exactly, and some people think, oh, it's poverty, it's a north-south divide, but actually some of the poorest boroughs are in London, and they're not at the bottom of the list. So it's not just a case of where the money is, there are other perhaps bigger factors at play here.
That's right. I think it is about the combination of what's happening to girls. So I think it's really, really interesting that when you talk to girls themselves, and we went up and down the country to talk to girls, they're saying actually what's a real problem for us is harassment in schools, they don't feel safe online, and they feel scared on the street. So their lives are being kind of contained, and also there are an awful lot of expectations against them.
Contained by whom? Males of all age?
So I think it is about communities, it's about their peers in school, it's also about the expectations that they put on themselves. So body image and social media and digital health of girls came up as a really big issue for them. So I think it's also about their peer group, not just boys, but other girls as well.
You've just touched on some massive issues. I mean, the obesity situation we have in this country is one we talk about, but that is just one part of the makeup of girls' experiences of growing up here.
That's right, and I think it's really important to look at that. What are girls experiencing? What is their lived experience? And that's why we looked at this data down to the local authority level, because it's really important to get to where girls are and where we can help them, where their communities, their schools and their local authorities can take action. And we're saying, look, you've got to listen to girls, you've got to understand what's happening to them and help and let them be part of the solution.
And just briefly to finish off, Kerry, I mean, boys obviously having their own struggles as well. Kids as a whole in this country are perhaps being failed in comparison to how wealthy a country we are on the whole. So is that something that needs to be looked at as well? Not just girls on their own, but the way that boys and girls will have relationships and interact.
And from our experience, what we'd say is that girls have a particular set of circumstances brought on by their gender. So it's really important to understand what is happening to girls. But boys are part of that conversation and part of the solution. So we really need to have that widely amongst the peer group, widely amongst girls and boys, and with families and schools and communities as well.
All right, Kerry, many thanks.
Thank you.
Still to come on 5 News Tonight. 1 year of Jeremy Corbyn as Labour leader. So, what do voters think? And we hear from cyclist Jody Cundy about his Paralympic gold. So well deserved. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News Tonight. Now, as David Cameron works out what his next job will be, if he wants one, his former opposite number, Jeremy Corbyn, is hoping to keep his current one. It was a year ago today that he was elected as Labour leader, promising a fight back. Since then, his party's plummeted in the polls and almost all of his shadow ministers have resigned. So what do voters make of it all? Layla Hayes has been finding out in Chorley in Lancashire.
They've been making carpets here in Chorley for 35 years. At the last election, Labour won here by a slim majority, but questions over Jeremy Corbyn's leadership loom large. Sales director Paul Cunningham has voted Labour all his life, but isn't convinced Mr Corbyn has got what it takes.
I don't think he's got the charisma that's going to lead a Labour government into what we'll class as our next generation of politics.
Fans of Jeremy Corbyn say he's transformed British politics and increased Labour Party membership. But these staunch Labour supporters have concerns.
I think his views are probably a little bit too left-wing for me. He's got a lot of caring policies that I think the country needs. We do need a new direction in politics. But for me, Jeremy's isn't the one that I would vote for at the moment.
Jeremy Corbyn's supporters say he can win elections, but all the workers we spoke to here weren't convinced.
I think he's a good sort of representation of the Labour Party, but as a leader, I don't think he's got those core qualities.
A recent poll found only 20% of voters believe Jeremy Corbyn shares their views. So we headed to a local cafe to see what they thought there.
I think he's a very passionate man, but he's not coming across as a good, strong leader for us.
He's had a lot to put up with, without a shadow of a doubt. But like I say, he's just not the man to run the country.
A year after becoming leader, Jeremy Corbyn may have his critics, but he is fighting on and is confident he can turn things around. Ayla Hayes, 5 News, Chorley.
A dangerous driver who called 999 while being pursued by police and asked them to stop has been jailed. Police footage shows Bruce Dewey speeding through traffic in Worthing in West Sussex in February. At one point, he swerved around a stop stick deployed to burst his tyres, before then having to dodge a lorry that had pulled out in front of him. Eventually, he was forced off the road by 2 police cars, as we'll see in just a moment. He pleaded guilty to dangerous driving and not having insurance. He's been jailed for 1 year and 3 months and banned from driving for 3 years. It's been announced that the Great British Bake Off is moving home.
Giant plaited showstoppers. This is the serpent with nowhere to hide.
Do you want a little sip of this, Michael, before I tell you what I think?
The current series of the hugely popular show will be the last on the BBC after the corporation lost the contract to broadcast it. Its producer says negotiations have been taking place for 1 year and that money was one of the main issues. We don't know yet who will host all those soggy bottoms. The gold and the glory keep on coming for Britain's Paralympians after Super Sunday, in which the team picked up 21 medals, 8 of them gold. There have been yet more today, including one for table tennis star Will Bailey, who seemed to rather enjoy improving on his silver from London. But it's all done wonders for the medal table. Great Britain are firmly in second with more medals than at the same stage 4 years ago. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Olivia Kinsley reports.
What a moment for table tennis player Will Bailey, on top of the world after winning his first Paralympic gold. The 28-year-old's celebration was infectious, the arena turning to smiles. Before even starting this 400 metres final, David Weir had given his all for Rio, missing the birth of his baby son Lenny, born yesterday in the UK. He'd hoped it would be the first of 5 golds, but came in a surprise 5th.
Aled Davis.
Better news for Aled Davis, who got gold and a Paralympic record in the shot put. It follows a Super Sunday which saw 8 GB golds, including for cyclist Jodie Cundy, so bitterly disappointed when he was disqualified at London 2012. He banished those demons with his 2nd gold in the team sprint.
That's absolutely stunning!
Kind of put all the wrongs to right that happened in London, and to come away with a gold medal in the kilometre in the team sprint, world records in the team sprint alongside Louis Rolfe and John Allen Butterworth. Yeah, it's very special.
At 40 years old, Richard Whitehead gave a masterclass in the 200 metre sprint.
And he defends his title, he kisses the camera.
And bronze for GB's Dave Henson, a former captain in the army who lost both of his legs to a roadside bomb in Afghanistan 5 years ago.
It's going to be gold to Great Britain!
In the pool, it was a 1-2 stunner, Bethany Firth winning gold in the 200 metres freestyle. Her teammate Jessica Jane Applegate, the silver. Today, Ellie Simmons broke the Paralympic record in her individual medley heat. She'll go for gold tonight, as will Sasha Kindred, who'll swim his last ever Paralympic race. It promises drama and emotion after a day of highs and lows. Olivia Kinsley, 5 News.
I'm joined now by David Clark, who's chair of the British Paralympic Association Athletes Commission. He represented Britain at 3 Paralympics and captained the football 5-a-side team. He was just reacting to what we were hearing there, saying, oh, great, brilliant, did she? Fantastic. Which is how we all feel, David. I mean, we're just doing tremendously well, aren't we?
It is an amazing Games. I think we looked at London and the success there. And, of course, you always try and build on it with the support the athletes get and their performances. But, you know, everything's moved on in terms of time and distance, and yet we're still doing incredibly well. So really proud of the athletes out there.
We'll talk exactly why in a second, but it'd be rude not to talk about your own sporting prowess. And let's have a look now at a goal you scored against Spain back in 2012. It's a cracker.
Yeah, I suppose it's one of my favourite moments, and except for the fact that I hugged the ref when I'd scored it, thinking it was one of my players. Yeah.
We've got some great dribbling going on. Oh, that's fantastic. That's an absolute corker. Yeah, there you are, hugging the ref. Didn't seem to mind too much. Now, look, it was obviously a high in so many ways, 2012, but already the Paralympians in Rio are doing better. What do you think the reason is for that?
Well, I think there's a few reasons for it. I mean, there is incredibly meticulous planning goes into being best prepared, both, you know, from athletes, coaches, the actual sports bodies, but also the British Paralympic Association. So, you know, the level at which we're able to do that with the increased funding that's available is most certainly having an impact. But I think the main thing is that, of course, you know, as this happens, so many of those records are getting broken and things are moving so fast because these are developing sports that are just getting better and better.
You know, the Paralympics, they are a separate thing from the Olympics. We know that. We've talked about that at length. But the funding structure seems to be fairly similar, i.e. when we do well at something like cycling, for example, in the Paralympics, it then gets more money and it snowballs.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, of course, the key is to keep feeding from beneath and bringing the athletes through. So one of the things that strikes me about this Paralympics is the youngsters coming through who've had the idols from 2012 and are really picking up on that vibe and starting to perform themselves. And many of them were expected to perform in Tokyo in 2020, and they're actually doing it in Rio 2016.
Just briefly, David, as well, a lot of people have hooked into the Invictus Games and the Warrior Games in the States as well. Has that made a difference this time?
We have medalists who've come through that route, and I think it's a fantastic initiative, and long may it continue.
Are you going to get back to playing at all? I mean, because I know the 5-a-side team haven't done great out there. They're missing you and your scoring prowess.
I really enjoy coaching my under-15s team. Thank you.
He told me at 41 the knees are starting to talk to him a little bit, so that's why he's retired. But great to have you with us, David. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks very much.
Right, that is just about it from us for now. Sian Welby is here with the weather next, and Sam is back with updates throughout the evening. For now, thanks very much indeed for your company. I'll be back again tomorrow at 5 and again at 6:30, of course. Thanks for watching. See you then. Bye-bye.